to accommodate this growth, what kind of generation do you think will add over time?
Well, look, let's kind of go to the underlying facts. About 80% of the time, a third of the generation, not just in PJM that I'm familiar with, but pick your ISO, pick your region, is sitting on the sidelines, not being operated. And that's because we have a really peakish system. Most of the time, we don't use nearly all of its capacity. That means we could add data centers for most hours and they're going to have a de minimis impact on the grid. In fact, arguably a beneficial impact because they will help to support the wires that have been built and the infrastructure that's been built. But we do have, and we're approaching peak hour issues. One interesting study that I commend to everybody is reading, I think was done by Duke University and released in the past few weeks, is the use of curtailment, or what we would call in the business demand response, as a means of creating some flexibility around the peak. And we used to see quite a bit of that. As much as 1% of the system supply in PJM had been demand response, customers willing to curtail when prices were high. And the fascinating piece about the Duke study is that even if we only get a 0.5% of customers, 0.5% of customers doing that, we would liberate on the grid the ability to interconnect 71 gigawatts of new power resources, an astonishing amount. You just talked about our fleet being one of the largest it is at over 20 gigawatts, but the equivalent of 3/4 of the nation's nuclear capacity, right? If we're 25%, a full 75%, imagine that being just fully liberated for use for data centers just by getting people to curtail on peak hours. Now, there'll be a point where that resource is exhausted. But one of the reasons, Philip, that I think this problem is easily solved in the first instance is we do have some slack in the system. We're not optimally using the system, so we have some ability to use that. And we have the ability to get customers to curtail as they have historically, and we'd actually increase the number of megawatts. So I've got this a little bit upside down from other speakers you might have been hearing. You probably hear throughout the conference this kind of panic. I don't feel it. I'm seeing the pace slow down in the sense that the hyperscalers are rationalizing their needs. I think we have system slack. I actually think, and I know this is a bit counterintuitive, but I think the question is really going to be, what do we do if we think about this in, call it 5-year chunks? What do we do in years 6 through 10 and 11 through 16, right? I mean, what are we going to plan from a resource standpoint? Because there, I think it's critically important that we plant the seeds today for the technologies we're going to need in the future.